Hello, and thank you for listening to South Fork Law. I'm Jill Bernstein, a retired criminal defense attorney, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Doug Hildahl, an attorney with the firm of Lester and Hildahl, and Dave Nelson from the law office of David A. Nelson. Both Doug and Dave are criminal defense attorneys, and Dave also has a practice that includes municipal court prosecutions. All three of us are passionate about justice and hope to use our time on the radio to provide information and insight into the justice system. Tonight it will be just Doug Hildahl and myself, as Dave is actually off being a lawyer and involved in a jury trial. With us tonight is a friend and a colleague, Angela Anderson. Welcome, Angela.
Hi, good evening.
Angela, would you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell our listeners where you come from and how you became a lawyer and the work that you've done since becoming an attorney.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me, first of all. I've been practicing now for 9 years, 8 of which in Whatcom County. Went to law school at Washington and Lee University in Virginia and met a man there who thought that Seattle music scene would be so cool. So I followed that guy to Seattle, and we ended up getting married and moving to Bellingham. And he is now a prosecuting attorney for the city of Bellingham, and I am a public defender here for the county, for Whatcom County. I've been doing that for 8 years now.
Well, what drew you to, first of all, being a lawyer, and then what drew you to public defense?
Drawing me to being a lawyer was that childhood dream of being in the courtroom and advocating and arguing, and I was just always that one challenging the teacher in elementary school, and thought it would be cool. How I ended up with criminal defense, I knew I didn't have the prosecutor making. I tend to root for the underdog. I like to help people, and being a defense attorney, especially a public defender, gives me that opportunity to work with people without having to worry about, can you afford this service or this action that I'm going to take? And I can focus on what I think is truly just best for the client.
So you mentioned you're married to a prosecutor. How? Actually, I know a little bit about this, having done it myself.
Right.
But I'm wondering if you can tell our listeners, how does that work? You're sort of on different sides of the ideological field, if you will.
Right.
And just tell us a little bit about how that works.
And first of all, our listeners should understand, while you're both in the same community, you're working in different systems, so your paths don't cross during the course of the day. They just cross in the morning and in the evening.
Exactly. Ethically, we cannot obviously go up against each other. Though it makes great movies, it is an ethical violation for us to practice against each other. I think it gives me a great perspective, and I hope it gives my husband the same perspective, that I think if I was married to someone who was also a defense attorney, you can get very slanted in your thinking. I feel like my husband really balances me out, and I can go home and go, why in the world does the prosecutor not believe this or not want to let my client do this? And he can provide that answer, and it most of the time makes some sense.
It allows you to see more than just a narrow piece of the puzzle. But if that's one of the special benefits from being married to a prosecutor, what are the challenges that come from being married to someone who's also an attorney?
Not leaving work at work. And you can find yourself spending your evenings talking work and hanging out with other lawyers and talking work, and just not leaving that at the office. When we had children, that was able to really change. We can't talk about what we do at the dinner table anymore. That's probably the challenge, is never feeling like you leave the courtroom. And then some things we totally disagree, philosophically on. I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head, but we can disagree on things,
And both of you are trained with black belts in arguments, so that can lead to translate into
blood being spilled.
And what I find is, and when my husband and I argue about mundane family arguments, is we don't argue about the substantive argument much. After the first minute, it becomes, no, you said this. No, you said that. And we start
Isn't
getting
it
each other
true?
into
Last
yeah.
Tuesday, you cross-examined.
Right, we become procedural arguments. It's not substantive anymore. It's very frustrating.
And you don't have a record to go back to.
Right.
That must be very frustrating.
Oh, I would love that, to just go back and say, see, and
I
now with text messaging, we can.
There you go.
So public defense for 8 years. You currently have some special duties. Is that right?
I do. I'm fortunate enough to be the public defender assigned to the Whatcom County Drug Court Program.
Would you tell our listeners what is the drug court program?
Absolutely. It's a wonderful alternative for people charged with felony crimes. These cannot be sex offenses or serious crimes or crimes of major violence. But it's a crime where somehow there's some connection to drug use. It does not need to be an actual crime, possession of a controlled substance, but maybe they've broken into cars or stolen cars because they have used drugs, or they find themselves
Burglarizing.
theft crimes. And this is an alternative where we supervise them it's a 4-phase program, 52 weeks, usually takes longer for clients, where we give them intense supervision, wraparound services, and they don't do jail. Instead,
When you say we, who are we talking about?
Sure. The drug court team is, again, this is so different than normal court. It's a collaborative program. So myself, David Graham from the prosecutor's office, Ani King, Glenn Hoyt are the 2 drug court coordinators. They're sort of like the counselor. They do the day-to-day meeting with the clients, providing urinalysis, helping them get into treatment. And then Judge Snyder. We're a team. We work together in the best interest of the client, and we're advocating together. So when someone enters the drug court program, they have to be screened. They have to match the criteria that, yes, they have a drug addiction, they need treatment, and then we make them go through some certain hoops, like getting into inpatient treatment, clean and sober housing.
What happens if somebody in drug court doesn't go to treatment, or they miss an AA or an NA meeting or something like that? What happens?
Absolutely. So drug court's kind of a carrot and stick program. You have the benefit, if you follow through with all of our requirements, you're going to get your criminal charges dismissed. That's amazing, right? And for some people, it's the opportunity to not become a felon. The reverse, though, is by coming to drug court, you're stipulating to your police reports. You're very likely to lose if you go to trial now. You've agreed these reports are accurate.
So at the entry, you're agreeing that basically I'm guilty of this crime, but I'm anxious to get some help with the possible benefit at the conclusion of having the charge dismissed.
Absolutely. I tell a client, you're saying, I'm guilty of this, but help me out, and if I mess up, then you can find me guilty of these charges. If I do really well, you'll dismiss them. And so if somebody comes in and just thought that this was the easy way out and doesn't want to comply with the program, they can end up with sanctions like community service, jail time. We have some creative options as well, sometimes journaling. The new sanction is to sit through the criminal calendar, because nothing's more painful than sitting in court for 4 hours with nothing to do. But we try to do things where it actually benefits the community or has some type of court process. But if you really mess up, then you will just be convicted of those charges, and you lose your benefit of plea bargaining.
Well, as I understand it, there's a sort of a progressivity of sanctions. They don't start out harsh, and they're also immediate, aren't they? I mean, there's really no arguing about what's going to happen.
Exactly. As the defense attorney, my role is a little different. It's not to say, oh, I know my client tested positive, but he shouldn't spend a day in jail. I don't get to make that argument. I make sure every client is held to the same standard, is how I see my job. So if Jim tests positive, Jim's doing a day of jail immediately. It's swift, immediate, so that they are punished for that behavior. Same time, though, if you have good behavior, that reward is immediate. We have a drug court client of the week. You get to go first in court and leave. We try to have incentives and gift cards if we can. T-shirts, hugs from the judge, those things are immediate as well. So it's positive reinforcement, not just negative. But you're right, that's the key, is these sanctions have to be immediate. The problem sometimes with our court system is if it takes 8 months to resolve a case, it doesn't doesn't feel like you're getting punished for that behavior. I mean, sure, it does feel like it's punished for that behavior, but it's so much lag time.
May feel like you're being punished because you have to come back to court about 15 times.
Exactly.
Well, so in court, you mentioned that people are expected to not use drugs and to participate in treatment, but does everybody just take their word for it that they are staying clean, they're doing the program, or is there some sort of monitoring?
There's a lot of monitoring. That's why the drug court costs a lot of money. It is an expensive program for the county, but the benefit of that has been shown that it's, in essence, a lot less than incarceration, and our recidivism rate is much lower. But let's talk about some of the supervision. Doug mentioned that there's a phase process. There are 4 phases. The first phase is when we're really on them. This is a first 13-week phase, and we are going to make sure that they are in their clean and sober housing. They're coming in for random urinalysis. They don't know when it's coming, so that's a great way to catch somebody if they're trying to sneak in drug use. Also, if your urinalysis are dilute.
What does that mean?
Dilute, if you chugged a bunch of water that morning, and so your urine is really not the normal color, if it's dilute and they have more specific criteria for that, we're going to treat it like a dirty UA. We don't want someone to be trying to mislead or trick the system.
There are surprise urinalysis tests.
Absolutely.
And what else are we doing to make sure that people are following through on their programs?
Absolutely. Well, they meet a lot with their counselor, so you can see, when someone's using, you can kind of just tell their affect. The most important thing about this is they're having a lot of interaction with the judge. They're coming in every week at the beginning and meeting with Judge Snyder. And it's so cool to see these clients learn that the court system is not, the drug court's not adversarial, that Judge Snyder's on their team. And the judge is supposed to spend, best practices show, 3 to 5 minutes with each client. And Judge Snyder really does do that. And he speaks with the client and sees how they're doing. And they start to see him as a friend and an ally, almost like a father figure. So that's holding them accountable.
What's expected besides not using drugs?
Absolutely. You need to be in a clean and sober housing. By the end of the program, we expect you to be either fully enrolled in school or have graduated from school or working. We want people to be employed or in school. And so just to receive disability is, to us, if that person has to be on disability, we understand. We try to give them an option, though, beyond that as well, like going back to school, so that they're doing something really exciting with their day and feeling good about themselves. Other things we require of them, behavior modification courses. We have a lot of those because sometimes our clients may not have been raised in the right family, and some of their value systems are a little different than maybe yours and mine. And this is a way to teach you to feel excitement and happiness from good things in your life and not just that high of shoplifting or that high from using drugs. They have group meetings. We've just started an alumni program where we're having graduates come back and interact with our clients. And it's great because it's keeping people who have graduated connected to the program and working their sobriety, but also giving younger clients a chance to see, hey, there is something better out there for me, and I have somebody to call who's been through this.
You're listening to South Fork Law. Today our special guest is Angela Anderson, public defender, and works in drug court in Whatcom County. You've talked a lot about, what the strictures are on the clients and so on and so forth. Tell us a little bit about what a day in drug court looks like. I mean, it all happens on one day, right? One afternoon,
Right.
Thursday afternoons.
Right.
And people can come and see it. If
Absolutely.
the public can
We'd
come
love
and see
for
it.
you to come and see it.
Okay. But tell me, how does it start? What happens from when you start
Absolutely.
to when you finish?
So there's a process we do at 1:30 to 2:30 before court starts.
This is on Thursdays
This is
on
on
the third
Thursday.
floor of the Whatcom County Courthouse, and the public is welcome.
The public is welcome. So the pre-meeting they are not at 1:30. This is a private time for us to speak with the judge and the counselors to see how the clients are doing, what happened with each client that week, Was it a good week? Did something positive happen? Was this a bad week? Did they have to get a tooth pulled this week? Did they graduate from their GED program? We talk about some private things. The judge then takes that information and he goes out on the bench at 2:30, and that's when we'd love for you to come. And the judge goes through each phase with the client. So he calls in all the phase 4 clients first, phase 3, phase 2, phase 1. And let me explain, phase 1 are the people the farthest in the program, whereas phase 1 are the newest people. So we want the newer people to see how the phase 4 people are doing. Plus they get to leave. And so that's an incentive.
To progress in the program.
Right. And so the judge has that 3 to 5 minutes interaction with each client and just see how they're doing. He'll hand out the sanctions for those who are in trouble. It's also an opportunity for those who are in custody. They can be transported over who are wanting to do drug court to view it and see if maybe this is a program I'd like to be applied for. The best days to come to drug court are truly the graduation days. That's probably every 60 to 90 days when we graduate about 4 to 5 people who have made it through this year-long process, maintain sobriety, and it's an exciting time for the judge to give out sort of awards and prizes, and we clap. I mean, it's a very big deal. This may be the only thing a client's successfully graduated from, and it's monumental. They bring their family. It's a wonderful day.
Yeah, it can be very emotional.
Absolutely. I always cry.
I've been to a few myself. Does it always take a year for people to graduate, or does that vary?
That's the minimum time. And I think
okay.
we've had maybe 2 or 3 clients ever do that.
Okay.
It usually takes longer because in reality, people stumble. And, you just may not, each phase has certain little requirements. I won't go through all the nuances, but, maybe you weren't able to pay the rent on time, so you didn't get your 90 days of clean and sober housing in before your phase ended. So you might have to be in that phase for a couple extra weeks. Sometimes clients are really struggling that first phase. They've gone back to inpatient twice. They've used drugs a couple times. I've had clients whose phase 1s have lasted an entire year.
Really?
But, as I've heard from the prosecutor's side, they would almost rather a client struggle while in drug court than just be out there floundering around. At least we have our eye on them. And these clients, for the most part, aren't committing new crimes. We're keeping our eye on them.
And doesn't the fact that some can be in phase 1 for a year, that kind of highlights one of the primary characteristics of drug court, which is relapse is accepted as part of the process.
Right.
People make mistakes.
People make mistakes.
And they're not immediately thrown out or put in jail because of it.
Exactly, because there's a pink cloud a lot of clients get on after they come back from inpatient treatment, feel great, and in fact, I see a lot of relapses early on.
Sure.
I see a lot of relapses from clients in phase 4, where they're almost done with the program. They're not breathing down their necks anymore. They're in their own apartment. Life is good, so they go, I can hang out with those old friends and say no. And they can't say no. And they realize they're not superwomen or superheroes, and they mess up.
How are those violations treated? The ones where somebody has made it that far and had that much success and slips?
You're treated the same as if you're phase 1. You're going to go to jail for the number of uses. So with one use and 1 night in jail, and you don't get bumped back a phase, but you have to be clean and sober for a certain amount of time before you can graduate. Right. So you can't relapse the week before graduation. But we don't want them to dwell on it. You pick yourself back up. Let's see what we need to do. And we've had to sometimes send them back to inpatient in phase 4. But most of the time, they can address it, and they handle it, and they speak with their counselor, and they speak with their treatment program, and it's
But the ultimate punishment, if you really can't get it through your head that you got to stay clean or come up with the will to make that happen, is you lose your place in drug court, you're found guilty, and you're punished as though you hadn't spent a day in there. Is that right? So, Angela, why? Would you tell our listeners, why is drug court a better alternative than just incarcerating the individual from the get-go? Why? Why use drug court? Why use this alternative?
Well, I think there's the statistical answer, which is that drug court works and that the recidivism rate is so much lower when you actually spend the time to provide treatment and give a more holistic approach. You're not just punishing the problem, you're helping someone get clean, get housing, get education, get work, give back finally to the community. But there's a public defender answer to this, which is I don't want to send my clients to jail. It just feels so frustrating to see them come back and come back and come back. And
Warehousing the individual.
right. It's very easy for me to plea a client out to a year in prison with good time and credit for time served. They're doing 6 months, probably less, and being thrown back out on the street with little or no treatment, and they're right back in. And so they're not paying their taxes, they're not doing any benefit, they're not going to school, they're just costing us a lot of money. And they feel miserable. They hate it. There's very few of my clients that enjoy that drug lifestyle. They may have had fun doing it when they were 16 or 17, but I have so many 25-year-olds who cry in my office, I'm tired of doing this. I'm not doing it for fun anymore. I'm doing it because if I don't, I'm sick. Or I hurt all day, or I haven't addressed the problem that I was molested as a child, or that my dad, who used to hit my mom. I don't want to do this anymore. Drug court is my chance to help the client get out of that cycle and maybe help their kid not be in that same cycle. A lot of drug court participants have babies, are pregnant, have children they don't have contact with. And I've seen so many families get reunited because of this program. So that's my answer. But
one of the criticisms I've heard levied against drug court is that the selection process is not very balanced. That is that the only way to get into drug court is to have the prosecutor approve your application.
Right.
So if, for instance, the prosecutor has a long history with somebody and might think they're just a bad person, they're not going to get in.
Right.
And the judge has no say-so in that.
Our drug court's a little different than
Tell
a
me
lot.
about that.
Yeah. My understanding, we were an early drug court program, and it's my understanding, I wasn't here for that development, is that David McEachran,
He's our
he's
prosecutor.
our elected prosecutor, would not approve the process unless their office was the screening mechanism. Now, this is where maybe being married to a prosecutor, I can somewhat appreciate the fact that we're dismissing felony charges, sometimes 17 counts, 18 counts. That's a lot for a prosecutor to swallow if they don't have some control over it. So I can appreciate that. What's frustrating is you're right. There's a lot of things that I don't think are consistent between the same clients. You're right.
So
Maybe-
if Sally hasn't upset the prosecutor in the same way that Susie has, Sally's more likely to get in because Susie has just given them grief over the years. And so even if they have identical charges and identical life stories, otherwise they may be treated differently in terms of an application.
Absolutely. And I don't know if I see that all the time because of what little access we're given to the decision-making process. I think the current frustration that I have is residential burglaries are one of the most recidivist crimes. Burglaries are. Now there's a policy, if it's a residential burglary, you can't do drug court. This is not a crime of violence. I can appreciate if this was a residential burglary and a family was home and they were terrified. We're talking about going into your mother's house and stealing her jewelry. Horrible crime. My heart breaks for the family. But that's the bread and butter of a drug court client, is stealing from houses. I should mention, any drug court participant is required to pay the victim back 100% before they can graduate. And so it's a chance where the victim actually would get compensation, whereas most clients, when you're in prison, you're not making money, you're not paying the victim back.
Right.
That's my biggest pet peeve right now, is why residential burglaries are somehow such a serious crime that they can't do this program. The other discrepancy, I think, are drug dealing charges, and drug dealers can't do drug court. That itself
And
sounds...
it doesn't matter how much.
Bingo. You're right. That sounds on paper really great. No, drug dealers can't do drug court. I think the citizens of the county would be surprised at how few big drug dealers I get as a public defender. The TV guys that are passing kilos of cocaine back and forth just aren't coming to my desk.
Well, the guy who sold a gram of marijuana to his friend is a drug dealer.
Right. So you're correct. So what you envision drug dealing to be, any sort of passing a controlled substance to another, even not for money, can be a drug deal.
Well, Angela, we've got just a couple of minutes left. Would you help us to end on a positive note?
Absolutely.
Would you tell us some success stories that come out of drug court and some ways in which this use of resources has changed lives for the better?
Absolutely. And what's funny is a lot of the success stories, I don't have a lot more information because I don't see them. And that's great. So I don't.
If you don't come back, it's a success. Yeah.
Absolutely. So one of our current success stories is we just had our first female tribal member graduate last week.
Wow.
And so as I can't tell you how many years drug court has been here, but the fact that we have not had a successful woman tribal member has always been frustration. So how exciting for our community. And we had a Lummi musician come and play at our graduation and tell stories, and it was a beautiful experience, and Jack Lowes was able to come and be part of that. It was very emotional. It was great. I've had a lot of...
Drug court isn't easy.
No, it's not easy, and again, it's a big deal when someone graduates. The stories I could go on and on. It's just nice to see them come by my office with their kids and just say, "I did it," and thanks.
I don't want to step on your response, but
Yeah.
I had a client who successfully navigated drug court not too long ago. A young woman who had all kinds of potential, very intelligent, very personable, very able to get along with
Yeah.
other people, but kind of a nasty drug problem, and she chose to hang out with folks who, excuse me for saying so, were beneath her.
Yeah.
With after a lot of persuasion, she finally got into drug court and made it through and graduated. And I don't know where she is, but I hope to see her successfully navigating the world someday.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope, Angela, that this program stays strong, and I would encourage our listeners to come and see it. You, too,
Yeah.
will then have the opportunity to understand what we've been talking about on the air tonight. It's on Thursday afternoons, the Whatcom County Courthouse on the third floor, Judge Snyder's courtroom, and truly the public is welcome, and I think our listeners would be able to see something that's going right in the criminal justice system.
Absolutely. And we're very excited to be adding a mental health court
Right.
that's going to begin January 28th, mostly for misdemeanors at this stage, but a new program to now spread sort of the drug court benefits to people who also suffer from mental illness. Very exciting news.
That's great. Thank you very much for talking with us today, Angela. This has been South Fork Law. For our listeners, please check us out on our Facebook page where you'll be able to listen to this and other shows that we've done in the past. I'd like to thank our engineer, Robert, for putting this all together tonight, and y'all find some justice out there.